Yesterday, rising Republican star Daniel Cameron, who's the Attorney General of Kentucky, announced charges against officers involved in the fatal shooting by police of Black woman Breonna Taylor, and very few charges were outlined. And now protests and unrest are once again rising, and we're going to talk about all of it. As a reminder, the story here is of 26-year-old Breonna Taylor, who was killed in her own home when three Louisville, Kentucky police officers executed what's known as a no-knock warrant. We've talked about no-knock warrants many times before, and the serious concerns about the use of no-knock warrants, particularly related to drug crimes. This was related to a drug investigation. Daniel Cameron said, listen, officers did announce themselves as they executed the no-knock warrant. Of course, the big picture, the red alert, is that officers used this warrant to search Breonna Taylor's home for someone who did not live there. No drugs were found in the apartment. And what ultimately transpired is that Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, having no idea that it was law enforcement in their home, because remember, there were no drugs there, the person they were looking for wasn't there, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend started shooting in what he believed was self-defense from potentially an armed intruder, and Breonna Taylor ended up killed in the gunfight that ensued. Now, one other note before we outline the charges. Yesterday's announcement was about criminal charges. The civil piece was settled last week. The city settled the lawsuit against the three officers involved. The lawsuit was brought by Breonna Taylor's mother, and the city has agreed to pay Tamika Palmer $12 million, and they've agreed to enact police reforms. Now, in terms of the criminal charges, one of the three officers charged with wanton endangerment. And that is not actually related to the death of Breonna Taylor. The wanton endangerment is because of the discharge of the officer's firearm inside of the apartment. It put neighbors at risk. That's the charge. Two other officers who fired shots, not charged at all. So in essence, nobody was charged for the actual killing of Breonna Taylor. This has predictably led to significant unrest, and protests have started, and the protests continue to build. And it's quite possible that the next 24, 48, 72, 96 hours are going to see even more of it. Authorities saying that two officers were shot and wounded last night in Louisville. The interim Louisville police chief, Robert Schroeder, said that they have a suspect in custody, but did not release too many additional details. We saw demonstrations and marches in cities including New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Philadelphia, just massive crowds. We have video of the crowd in Brooklyn near the Barclays Center, my sort of old stomping grounds when I lived in Brooklyn. That crowd eventually walked over the Manhattan Bridge and connected with another protest in Manhattan, in Chinatown and in surrounding neighborhoods. And we are seeing these all over the country, in addition to unrest that did become more violent in Louisville, Kentucky, which is the epicenter of this case. And again, overwhelmingly peaceful protesters with some provocateurs, as you typically see. So there's a few different things here. Let's do the political first, maybe. Politically, I still think this is bad for Donald Trump. This unrest related to racially tinged events is not good for Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump and some of his supporters continue to say these protests are a preview of Joe Biden's America. There will be more of this if Joe Biden is president. I believe most Americans see this, and they see it as part of the failures of the Trump administration, part of the failure of the ideology that Donald Trump espouses on police use of force. And we're seeing it reflected in the polls. We don't really have to wonder. After coronavirus and the economy, the third most important issue right now is this. It's race relations and this unrest and law enforcement. And Donald Trump's approval on that issue is very, very low. So I reject the idea that this helps Donald Trump. More importantly is the issue of justice. We have a criminal legal system that is meant to protect officers. Now, you can debate to what degree should officers be protected. And I am the first to tell you that to some degree they should be protected, in the sense that being a police officer is a potentially more dangerous job than being an accountant or being a teacher or being a cashier. And so some degree of protection makes sense for officers. The degree to which the default is we err on the side of the benefit of the doubt for the officers, that is allowing justice to not be served. So, I've given you the list before. We need demilitarization of police. We need special prosecutors to investigate police. Implicit bias training, okay. Fixing the war on drugs, a bad actors database. It's a very long list, 10 or 12 items, which I've outlined. But the precedent that is potentially set here is horrifying. If you have ever been associated with anyone who is potentially a criminal, the police can, in certain states, issue a no-knock warrant, go into where you're living, and you can end up shot dead with essentially no repercussions. Defending your home is not a defense in many of these cases. And remember, there was a grand jury that looked at a case. We covered it, I think, I don't know if it was a year or 2 years ago at this point. There was a case of a woman who fired a warning shot to get her husband her husband was approaching her and was abusive. She fired a warning shot in the garage and it hit drywall. She was charged more seriously than these officers. Okay. That doesn't make sense. So the system is hugely failing us. We will see the degree to which unrest continues in the next few days. But this is, we've been covering this for a long time. There's nothing new here, but the way in which it is now playing a role in the presidential election is certainly something, the timing of which could have political influence. And again, I do not believe it will be good for Donald Trump. If you love feeding your intellectual curiosity, but you're always struggling to find the time, check out one of my all-time favorite apps called Blinkist. Blinkist lets you consume an entire book on your way home from work. They take thousands of popular nonfiction books, condense each one into text or audio that you can get through in just 15 minutes, and you get all of the important core ideas and information from that book. It's perfect if you don't have enough time to do all the reading you want to do, or if you just want to sample a book before you buy the entire thing. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.